guys, so I'm so excited to finally be talking about this subject with you guys. I know that you love my psychology videos, so that's why I decided to do a psychology series on the channel. So I started with why we study psychology, and I will have that linked down below if you are curious to see that one. And of course I have a whole psychology playlist on my channel if you didn't know, so I will have that linked below too. Just a bunch of advice videos and things like that. But today we are finally doing the careers in psychology video because there are so many opportunities out there if you are interested in studying psychology, and some you probably wouldn't have guessed were related to psychology. I've been promising this video to you guys for like 8 months or something like that because I took a navigating psychology course last semester, which is a requirement for a bachelor's or in university. And just for reference for this video, I am going to be referencing that textbook from my class because the way it broke up the categories of all the like careers and stuff in the back of the book was really helpful when creating this video, like thinking about it. So I'm gonna go based on that. I don't think you can get this book just anywhere because it's meant for Sac State and for that class. It's specific to that class, so I don't think you can just like get this maybe online somewhere. Now there are tons of categories of things that are like opportunities in psychology and different careers and fields that you can study, but when most people think about psychology or you tell someone that you're studying it, they automatically go to the stereotypical therapist, counselor role. They picture that in their head, but there are so many other things in other categories under the umbrella, the huge umbrella of psychology. I will just put up on the screen all these lovely things that you can do that are kind of the categories we're going to cover. This is more like really general. I'm going to go a little bit more specific than just these, and I'm not going to focus on every single one because this video would be so long. So let's just get started. It's already long. Obviously, first and foremost, I want to talk about clinical and counseling psychology and what the difference is, because that is the route that I'm taking, and I'm sure a lot of you, because that's what we think about when we think about psychology, that might have been the subject that piqued your interest in psychology in the first place, so I thought we'd start there. Now, clinical and counseling psychology are very different, but they have the same kind of goal in mind. Clinical psychology focuses more on the diagnoses of mental illness and dealing with those mental illnesses, whereas counseling psychology focuses more on the general well-being of a client and focuses less on the mental illnesses per se. You know, they both want to alleviate any symptoms or any, distress that that person might be going through. They just go about it in different ways. Well, not most of the time, but clinical is known for like medication. Like if you're a psychiatrist, you can prescribe medication for mental illness, whereas counselors don't do that. They would refer someone to a psychiatrist for that if they felt like they needed it. I personally am going the counseling route. I'd rather help people and their general well-being. I'm very much, if you're interested, a cognitive, like behavioral type of person, being mindful and present, and I'm more about changing the negative ways of thinking versus action-oriented or client-oriented techniques. If you're familiar with psychology, that probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but maybe in another video I'll get into different techniques and things that you can do, like different areas of expertise, if you will. Now, what you can do with a bachelor's degree in clinical and counseling psychology, you can become a human services worker, a social worker, or substance abuse counselor. And those though, because, okay, basically I'm just gonna lay this out there right now. You can't do a whole lot, you can't make a whole lot of money with just a bachelor's in psychology. You pretty much need to go to grad school in order to probably achieve your ultimate goal, what you have in mind. You're probably not going to be able to do that with just a bachelor's. I'm just going to say that right now. Sorry to burst your bubble. So with a graduate degree, you can obviously practice. You can counsel people. You can be a clinical psychologist. A lot of companies will hire psychologists or counselors that have a graduate degree to help build programs, and there's other like IO type work that you can do, which I will get into industrial organization psychology in a moment. But most people, when they go into this field specifically, is to practice. Moving on to school psychology, and this is very similar to the clinical counseling route, and I'm actually going into school counseling or school psychology. It's basically what you would imagine, but there are other opportunities that you can do with a degree. So if you have a bachelor's degree, you can become a teacher or childcare worker, teacher's assistant or early childhood behavioral specialist. A lot of people will also work with children with special needs in this kind of field. And then of course if you have a graduate degree you can become a school psychologist or a school counselor, which they do so much. When you think about counselor in a school setting, you probably think of like an academic counselor, but they can do that, but they can also do so many things. They can be the person that the students talk to, you know, like the typical therapist type of role. They just do so much. So that's what I want to do, is school counseling. So yeah. Next is legal and forensic psychology. I used to want to study forensic psychology back in high school because I really wanted to be CSI. Weird fact about me. And it's really fascinating to me. So obviously it works with law. It works with law enforcement. They can do so many things. So here's some of the careers that you can do with a bachelor's degree. You can become a police officer, a correctional officer. You can do probation parole officer, juvenile detention worker, and forensic science technician. So those are some opportunities that you can do with a bachelor's in forensic psychology. When you think about police officer and like parole officer, you wouldn't expect they would go the psychology route, but it really helps in their job. I think because psychology applies to every single one of us, there are so many like jobs that need some form of psychology training, but it may not be the traditional educational route. But I think it benefits so many careers because, like I said, it affects everyone. So with a graduate degree in forensic psychology, you can do correctional psychology, forensic examiner, police psychology, trial consultant, and politics. If you ever want to get into politics, you can study forensic psychology. A lot of students, when they go into forensic psychology, want to do some sort of like profiling, but that's actually, what is it called? An investigative technique. In forensic psychology is a mental health field, so when people want to do more profiling for people, they recommend that you go through law enforcement degree instead of forensic psychology. I'm gonna leave some little checklists down below, if you will, because in the book there's these checklists and it'll say, like, for instance, is forensic psychology for you? And then it'll ask all these questions like, do you like shows like CSI and stuff like that? So but that's just for that one. But each one has that in the book, and I want you guys to be able to do something like that because it'll kind of tell you what you're more suited towards or what interests you more. Granted, it's not a foolproof thing, it's just a checklist. Take it with a grain of salt, but it's fun to do. So I'll leave that down below if it'll all fit in the description box. Is there a maximum like character limit in there? I don't know. Next is health psychology, and this is what you would imagine. You work with people and their health, like physical health, but it's also still a mental health field. So with a bachelor's degree, you could be a recreational therapist, occupational therapy assistant, physical therapy assistant, or health educator. Though it is like it's related to physical health, it basically studies these psychological influences on health. Sorry about my lisp with my Invisalign today. It's really bad for some reason. I don't know why. It's about why people become ill and how they respond when they become ill, and then also treatment and things like that. That's why it would be more like recreational therapist, or physical therapist and things like that. So if you're interested on kind of the mental effects of, you know, health, it doesn't really go into graduate school or, you know, if you had a graduate degree, so it may not even be required. I don't know for sure. I'm sorry. I'm really not the best person to be doing this video, but I'm just sharing the information I know from the book. And then related to that is sports psychology, and with a bachelor's degree you could be a fitness instructor, recreational worker, physical education teacher, sports instructors and coaches, sports reporter. It's basically related to health psychology. You're looking at the mental effects of sports and physical health and things like that. It is the study of psychological aspects of sports, but it's related to any physical activity or exercise. It's not necessarily limited to sports. But if you're really into sports and exercise and things like that, then this might be the kind of direction for you because it, you know, works with the psychological aspects of it, which if that interests you, in relation to sports and exercise, then it might interest you. Now we're getting a little sciencey. Someone commented on my last psychology video saying that psychology is not a science. I'm sorry. I don't know what impression you got that it wasn't a science, but anyway, this is biopsychology, cognitive neuropsychology, and clinical neuropsychology. Sounds really fancy, isn't it? Pretty much can only be a technician if you have a bachelor's in this, because the science and the biopsychology behind psychology is super important, and you really need a good education in order to successfully perform in these kind of job settings. So you can be with the bachelor's science technician, psychiatric technician, clinical laboratory technologist or technician, pharmacy tech. So biopsychology studies the relationship between biology and behavior, and also things like drugs associated with that, just anything chemical kind of with the brain and dealing with the brain and the behavior and the outcomes of it. So cognitive neuropsychologists will look at the relationship between neurons firing and mental activity, kind of how our thoughts are created and the science behind our thoughts and behaviors and things like that. So if that sounds fascinating to you, go for this. It sounds a little like a lot of information to me. I did love biopsychology though, and it's required because you obviously need to know how the brain works and things, and it was really fascinating. We got to dissect things and look at the brain, not a human brain but a sheep brain, and that was really interesting, and studying how the neurons work and how dreams work, and it's just really cool. So it is a really fascinating field, but it's very education based, and I mean it's science. It's really a science. And then obviously with a graduate degree you can do pharmaceutical things, biotechnology research, so you can do more on the research end of things, and obviously practice. So next is industrial and organizational psychology, as I mentioned before. Now this is more for work, like in the workplace. It studies the relationships between employees and employers and, you know, coworkers, and the performance in an office setting or just in a work setting, not necessarily office, but in a work setting. And people will hire, employers will hire IO psychologists to make sure that all their employees are performing at the best they can. And yeah, so with industrial psychology, it's selection and placement of employees, training and development of employees, performance evaluation, participation in applying and adhering to laws and litigation to make sure everyone's following the rules of the office and or workplace and things like that. Organizational psychology focuses on improving job satisfaction and quality of work life. Employers will want to know that their employees are liking what they do and just overall happy, because that equals better job performance and improved leadership and promote organizational development. A lot of people who study this will go into HR kind of jobs. If you have a bachelor's degree, you can go into HR or human resources. You can do commercial or industrial design assistants, administrative assistant, and office manager. With a graduate degree, again, you can go into human resources. You can be a consultant, usability specialist, I don't know what that is, environmental designer. So this is just making sure that everything in the workplace is going as smoothly as possible, making sure the employees are on the right track, they're happy, they're performing at their job, and making sure there's correct leadership throughout the office or job or whatever. I keep saying office because that's just, you know, general example. Now we're getting more into the experimental, cognitive, and quantitative psychology, more research based. A lot of people do go into research because that is so important in the growth of psychology. That's the thing about psychology. When you go into it, you never stop learning. You will never stop researching, or, you know, at least doing your own research as far as like reading articles and journals and things like that. You are never done. You're never done with education because it is such a growing field, and it's just so important that you stay up to date. I mean, there are some fields where you stop learning at a certain point, you know, there may be new rules and different techniques that you may have to learn, but nothing I think as extreme as psychology, because it's ever changing. It's a scientific field, so new discoveries are being made, more research is being conducted, so it's really important that you continue your education on it. A lot of careers will also, or jobs in the psychology field will also require you to go to conventions and take classes to further your education if something changes in the field. So actually, people who go into experimental, cognitive, and quantitative psychology can also be a computer programmer, a computer support specialist, budget analysis, and then with a graduate degree you can do operations research analyst, computer systems analyst, database administrator, actuary, what is that? Financial analyst, and data mining. This whole thing sounds really complicated. It's not what interests me personally, but to each their own. There is a lot of science and a lot of statistics and math and writing involved in this kind of field, so if you're not into that, We're down to the last 2 categories. You thought I was done. Nope, it's a long ass video. Yes it is. Next up is social and consumer psychology. This is things like advertising, real estate agent, retail, public relations specialist. Those are some things you can do in a bachelor's with this. Market research, product development consultant, and management. I mean, social psychology is pretty self-explanatory. It's how the individual interacts in a group or with society, and how they interact with each other and their behaviors in the environment. Consumer psychology is more like the subliminal messages in advertising and why commercials and marketing campaigns are more successful than others. So if you kind of want to go into tricking people and into buying things and stuff like that, consumer psychology is for you. It also studies how we process information and make decisions about purchasing products and things, which, you know, you could study YouTube in itself and as a marketing type of thing and go into that and why we want to believe that products are good just based on what people say. So there's a lot you can do with social and consumer psychology, and it's a really interesting field because you can go into retail and just working with companies and building commercials and things like that. And lastly, developmental psychology, and this is about development throughout the ages. It's interested in the changes over the first year of life, the ways in which the media influences children's behavior, but also in adults. Midlife crisis, for instance, older adulthood, death. So you can do gerontology aid, child life specialist, careers in nonprofit organizations, scientist practitioner careers, product development and media consultant, social policy research. Most people in this field do work with children and the early stages of life because that is where it's like the densest of development possible, is in the early stages of life, but also how we change throughout life. They also conduct a lot of research. A lot of these things you will conduct research in. In fact, you should, no matter what you're doing, try and do your own type of research, or at least analyze articles and things like that. You might have to do that anyway for school, but research is such an important factor in psychology, and you'll probably have to experience it at one point or another, whether it's for a class or in real life, or you'll be a part of a research experiment or something. You may have to participate in them. So just be open-minded to that kind of thing, and even though it may not be exactly what you're interested in, it's basically required because, I mean, research is what fuels psychology. So that was this video. You guys tired of talking about psychology yet? Let me know what other topics you may want me to discuss regarding psychology. If you want me to go further in detail, I'll talk about whatever, the theories and things like that, and ways that you can practice if you're doing counseling. From here on out though, it'll probably be really based on counseling and the clinical side, because all the other ones I'm not personally studying, so I can't give a lot of insight to them. But as far as the counseling side, I will share my education with you as I go. But do let me know if you want me to go, you know, further into detail, what other topics you want me to discuss, if you want me to talk about mental illness. I'm also really fascinated with serial killers, so if you want me to go into the minds of serial killers, we can do a video like that, because I'm just really obsessed and I do a lot of research on them, and I have books and movies and things like that. I'm just weird. I just thought I'd mention it, but it could be anything, whatever you guys want me to talk about. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.